customer like L'Oreal is really taking this kind of use case really to the edge. And of course, we have a lot of other use cases like security and also other use cases that really offer together a central, visible, scalable platform when you can really, as I said, to share and socialize and monetize the application that our consumer use, our employee use. And these applications are constantly changing and are measured in days. With customer expectation really high, they want a quick access to digital experiences supported by data. And at the bottom, we have the backend systems where the business and the system of records are stored. And these changes are made, measured in years. So not so frequently you change your ERP systems. And Apigee really sits in the middle and acts as a bridge between two components, between two systems that runs at different speeds, different protocols, different compliance, different standards, different regulations. And it's really about the bridge the gap between these two layers. Regarding some kind of use cases, so what can really customers can do with Apigee and what they are actually doing. So a couple of common use cases like Danone, which Apigee really helped them to embracing microservices and the reliability or scalability of Google Cloud. Also, Apigee really helps to modernize their legacy application and infrastructures. For example, with Booking.com, it's really allowed them to really break the monoliths and help them to in their multi-cloud strategy. And also another use cases is, for example, to unlock and to open new business channels and to unlock new revenue streams by, for example, doing some kind of monetization to the APIs. And also leveraging API products. For example, customer like L'Oreal is really taking this kind of use case really to the edge. And of course, we have a lot of other use cases like security and also other use cases that we are seeing that very important to the enterprise customers. A bit more technically, so at high level, it's really helpful to think about Apigee in three layers that really offer together a central, visible, scalable platform when you can really, as I said, to share and socialize and monetize the APIs, but of course, ensuring the security access and collecting valuable metrics. So the layers are, let's start from the bottom, the API gateway services. Then we have the API analytics and monitoring services, and then the developer ecosystem services. So the API gateway is the service that provides the runtime functionality. It's including the API processing engine, OAuth, and any other security policies. All the request and response, revision control, orchestration, and caching. And the next layer is the API analytics services, which really enable the enterprise to report on various aspects of the API program, including API proxy traffic, response time, latency, cache performance, developer engagement, and so on, both from the technical side, but also from the business side. And the next one is really the developer ecosystems services. This is about, this service is really about to provide the front-end infrastructure for the API, including the API portal, API catalog, really the place to engage with your API program. So this one-stop solution is really, the idea is really to introduce one-stop shop that introduce high level of performance, security, scalability, and really to be an enterprise ready to really to enable your API program. So just a couple of seconds before we will go to some kind of Apigee live demo. what I wanted to show you in this slide is this is really about the reason that Apigee is constantly recognized as a digital, let's say, a leader in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner. So the idea is really that we really excel in all the API lifecycle of the API program, from the designing stage till monetizations. And really, that platform of Apigee is really about really improving the developer productivity, reduce the cost of developing apps, and really increasing the speed to the market. And the idea of the demo that I want to show you right now with Apigee is really how the API program can look like from both of the sides, from the API developers, the one that actually develop APIs, and the API consumers. And the idea is really to see the both of the sides. So I will share my screen. Moment. So that's Apigee's UI. Here you can see again the develop. This is the layer about developing the API proxy. We can see the publish. This is about the engagement, API portal, developers, application, and the monitoring analytics layer. So you can see there is a place for each one of the components that I mentioned before. So the idea is really to start from the end, from the, let's say, an API program, some kind of API program, and to see how the API consumer are engaging with the platform. And now it looks like from the both of the side, from the API developers and also from the API consumer. So here you can see some kind of open banking API portal. It's very easy to create that with Apigee. You can customize it whatever you want to customize. And the idea, once the API developer is started to engage and register, you can start actually to consume the APIs. And the idea is really to help them to understand with the term of API products, which is a set of APIs that the API consumer can actually create value with that API. So the idea is really to help him to understand what can he create for each one of these API products. And for example, if we have here some kind of API products that called Bitcoin API, with some explanation about what this set of APIs can do. Once the developer is entering into that, you can see also the open API spec. You can see the documentation that can help him to really start to engage without open API spec. So this is about engaging and documentation and helping to the API consumer to start working with that API. So once he started to he registered and log in and did login to that API portal, the API consumer can build something that called an app. Here you can see that it's the name of the app is Bitcoin app. Then you receive some API key and some credentials that you can work with the Apigee. And then you can choose the API products that you want to start working with. And then you can download the Open API spec. Here you can see it. I already did that to my Postman and starts to really to engage. And the idea right now that what I'm going to show you is how I can protect an API asset with a couple of security policies. And the idea is really to show you what the API consumer will see when he has some couple of when he, for example, doesn't send the API key or something like that. And how it looks like from the developer perspective. So once the developer registered, and how it looks like from the Apigee perspective. So here you can see that there is a list of the developers, and here I can find myself. That's my name. I can see since when I'm registered and a couple of custom attributes that I can use them in order to use that during the request reply session. Also, I can see the app. You can see that it's the Bitcoin app that I registered. I can see here the API keys, the API products that this application is using, another custom attributes that I can use that during that request and reply session, which means, for example, if for some reason I did some upgrade to the backend, and for some reason one of the app don't know how to work with that new version, so I can use that custom attributes and say and route this specific app, that specific request to a different backend. So you have a lot of flexibility with Apigee regarding to the manipulating the request code. So this is how it looks like from the operational side. Also, if I go for example to the API product, the Bitcoin API, this is the actual set of API proxies. This is, let's say, here you can see the description of the API, what can be the business value when trying to let's say working with that API. I can see here the actual API proxy. This is the actual API proxy that I exposed. Which methods I'm giving permission to that API product, and a lot of custom attributes that I can use that during that session. Now we'll go back again to the actual developer side and try to show you how it looks like from the security policies, how it looks like. So here I have a classic REST API, and this is the JSON that I want to send. And you can see that once I did send, I received some kind of message that transaction accepted. And I want to try to show you the policies that I implemented. So let's start from, for example, from API key. So if I will change that API key, for example, you can see that I'm receiving an invalid API key. So this is some kind of API key policy that I implemented. What about verifying JAG token? So if I will change the JAG token, again, you can see invalid token. So another security policy, and the idea is really to show you again from the API developer side how easy it is to really implement that. What else? So maybe about regex. So here you can see the customer ID is 9 digits. Maybe I will remove one, and again you can see regular expression. So you can see another like policy that you can use when you want to secure your API assets. What about maybe to do some kind of manipulation with the actual payload? So maybe I want to add another field to that JSON. And you can see that there is a JSON tweet protection that said that there is an exceeded object entry. So it's blocked the request, and this request actually is not going forward to the backend. And some kind of other policy that I want to show you about spike arrest. So I will try to send too much requests. And you can see another policy, spike arrest. And also, if I will try to reach to the quota, you can see here, rate limit. So you can see that I tried to add security layer to that API. In order to really expose that API outside and start to help our API consumer to start working with it. And the idea is right now I will show you how it looks like from the API developer side. So again, I will go to the develop API proxies. Here you can see all the API proxies And then I will go to the Bitcoin API. Here you can see the status of that API proxy, the revision, the environment, the base path for that API. And then I will go here to the develop, to the actual place to actually, I can put the logic behind. And here you can see, I will do that. Okay. And here you can see that this is the actual request. And here you can see the actual flows. You can see the verify API key, the verify chat token, JSON tweet protection, regex protection, quota, rate limiting. And then after all these policies, there is an API call to the actual backend. And how it looks like from the configuration perspective. So you can see that it's very easy to create new policies. Very easy to add that XML, JSON to XML, Open API spec, XML to JSON. You can do whatever you like. You can remove HTTP headers. You can enrich the API call. A lot of policies to really help you to focus on the actual. I'm not saying business logic, but actually to focus on the business and not trying to invent the wheel from scratch. So this is the idea about the actual policies. And you can see that if I will go to and push on the API key, for example, very easy. So you can see that the actual API key is we are taking it from the HTTP header from the X API key. Also, if I will go to the regex. So here you can see that it's very easy to understand that the customer ID is a query param, and this is the pattern for the regex. So it's very easy to really implement that. And also the quota policies, and you can see it's just an XML with very easy parameters to just to change. And also there is a very strong and nice documentation about each one of them that you can use in order to really to make it more robust. And of course, in our next session next week, it will be more deep dive into Apigee. So there you can see some more, let's say, maybe complex use cases of policy. But the idea is really about to focus on what's really matter about the business value of the API, the business logic of the API, and all the things that are like security, governance, scaling, monitoring. For example, Apigee will really take care of that. Before finishing, I will show you really a bit how for example, the monitoring looks like. And also after that, Nabil will take care of how the deployment of Apigee, how it looks like, the best practice of Apigee regarding to environments organization. Also, we will have enough time some questions. And as Kevin mentioned, tomorrow we have another time slot for really to answer your questions after that session. So the monitoring, this is how it looks like. You can see that you can actually understand from both.
Before you move on, quick question from me. I would like to understand what kind of policies would you recommend as a best practice to be definitely part of an API?
Okay.
I think you showed quite a few interesting policies, but what is our recommendation? What
will go again? So besides that networking, monitoring, sorry, that you can see both of what's happening with your API program, I will go to this API proxy, and I will do some kind of overview about the security policies. So again, I'm here. You can see the flow of the API proxy. So for example, one of the most important one are the API key. It's really about Apigee to understand who is the API consumer. This is one of the really critical policy. Another one is about authentication and authorization. So Apigee can be the IDP, the actual authentication server, but also you can use any other IDP. So in this example, Apigee is just doing the chat token verification. So this is another policy that it's pretty important. And of course, to add security policies, it really depends on the actual what you really want to protect. But let's see a couple of security policies that can be relevant. For example, if you want to log the API request and the reply to some third party, you can use that through the message logging policy. Also, if you want to do some service call out to a different API during that API session, you can do that with service call out. So it really depends what's your actual logic of the API policy. So if we go to security, for example, basic authentication, verify chat token, OAuth verification, regular expression, API key, as I mentioned. This kind of really XML quick protection to really, if for example the actual request is an XML, so you can make sure that the XML is valid. So there is a lot of policies that really help you to make sure that you can focus only about the business logic. Like for example, quotas. You don't need to, for example, to implement any quota system. Apigee can do that for each partner, for each application. Spike arrest to really to make sure that you can protect your backend. So there is more than 50 policies in Apigee that can really help you to focus again about what really matters. Yeah, so from here, I think I will give the hand to Nabil to continue with some kind of Apigee deployment, Apigee best practices, and yeah. The idea is really to give an API key to any of the actual consumer. So the idea is really to understand who is using and doing what. So once every API call comes with an API key, so you can actually have more control about who is consuming and what is consuming.
Perfect. So in this section, we will go through like Apigee pay-as-you-go deployment best practices. Perfect. So yeah. So in this section, I would highlight on the some different parts of. But first of all, the end-to-end architecture that you would get after deploying Apigee pay-as-you-go is first of all Apigee instance within the Google managed project, which Google will manage for you because it's a fully managed service. And what Yari was showing in the demo was the Apigee organization with an environment, and also what he showed was also the management plane in which you have the developer portal, the analytics, and all the management services as well. These two it's under the hood. It's a GK cluster which is managed by Google, and how you get access to this Apigee instance is through your own project. So how traffic enters is through your own customer project. So once you do Apigee provisioning, which we'll see in the next slides, at the end of it, you will have either an external load balancer if you are planning to expose your APIs to, let's say, external partners or developers, or you might also have an internal load balancer if you only want to allow your internal developers within your organization to access these internal APIs. But the way traffic is entering into Apigee is done through your own project. And this would be, let's assume in this case, you have an external load balancer in your own Google Cloud project. The traffic that would be coming from the northbound from your API consumers will first hit the load balancer, and then it will be routed towards the Google managed project in the Apigee instance. And this VPC peering that you see is something that you do when you provision Apigee. You tell during provisioning that this is my project from which I want to peer this Apigee instance that I'm provisioning right now. And we'll also see some of like the more complex scenarios as well, in which if you have a shared VPC, so how does the architecture look like in that case? From your Apigee instance, the traffic can either go towards the backend services. If they are exposed on internet, they could go from directly to internet, and you might want to, for example, configure MTLS over here, so that is possible. Or if you have any internal backend services within Google Cloud, that would the traffic would go directly to these internal backend services within GCP. So this is the architecture that would how it would look like when you will provision an instance. So what I'm going to also explain now is how Apigee organizations, instance, environment groups work, and how does it relate to your GCP project. So when we talk about Apigee organization, it is a container where your Apigee actually resides. So Apigee organization would be mapped to or associated to a GCP project. So once you choose provisioning, you have to choose which project do you want to provision Apigee into, and in Apigee world we call it an Apigee organization or Apigee org. So once you do that, once you choose the project, the second step is that you choose the run or you create a runtime instance. And what runtime instance actually is a Kubernetes cluster which runs the Apigee services. So once you're provisioning, you select that I want to provision one instance in Europe West 1, and I want to have one instance in, let's say, US East 1, right? So in that case, you would have the GK cluster that would be spin up and fully managed by Google in this case. And you can have multiple instances as well with the same single management plane. Then we have something called environment. So environment is simply it's a logical isolation of the runtime instance. So what? So for example, if you have dev, test, and production, you would create 3 environments within Apigee. There is also one. Some of the customers, they ask the question that should we create multiple environments within one org, or should we have multiple orgs for different environments? So if you want fully separation of data, then in that case you can have one project and maybe call it a production project, and if you and maybe one project for non-production environments. But if you have a case in which you can have all environments within one project and there's no compliance constraints, then you can have one GCP org, and within that you can have multiple environments configured like dev, test, or production. So every API and the API proxies that Yari was showing you, that would be published. You have to choose an environment where we want to publish that API proxy to. So after that, we have environment groups, and it's a logical grouping of environments. So for example, let's say you have one environment group called non-production. You can have multiple environments within that, which could be dev and test. And for production environment group, you might have production and staging. And these environment groups are accessible through the host URLs that you will configure when you will create an environment group. So if we look at these concepts within one picture, the outer box that you see is an Apigee org or organization. And within that, you have these three, in this example, three environment groups, production, test, and dev, each accessible through a URL that we have defined within that environment group. And here you see we have environments within those environment groups. So dev is one environment within this dev environment group. This is the test environment. And in production, we have configured two environments in one environment group, which is production and sandbox. And this blue boxes in the backdrop are instances. So in this case, we have created two instances. And these two instances, the environments are actually attached to all of these two instances, right? So in this case, if you configure an API in production, then you both the instance in US and EU would have access to this environment or would be associated with this environment that we have created over here. So in this case, you don't have to manage multiple instances. You will configure it a proxy once, and you will choose that I want to publish it to production instance and production environment, and then it would be available in both regions that we have deployed onto. When it comes to Apigee, we are in the top right in the Gartner quadrant, and the reason for that is that we keep on adding new functionalities based on the trends that we see in the market. So let's say if we talk about some of the new innovations that we have done in last 1 year or 2 years is API Hub, which is like a catalog for the enterprise to consolidate all the APIs within your organization, whether it's managed on Apigee or if it's managed on any other gateway, or if it's unmanaged as well. You get information for all the APIs in one single place. So that is one functionality. Another functionality or add-on in Apigee that we've added is advanced API security, in which what we've done is we have leveraged all the intelligence that we have developed to protect our own APIs within Google, like search, maps, YouTube, all of those APIs. And we have implemented those ML models in Apigee so that you can protect your traffic in a similar way that we protect our own Google traffic, right? So that would help you based on machine learning to develop a context of a person. And if someone is trying to probe your APIs at a very slow rate and trying to change some parameters or basically trying to do some sort of sophisticated attack to find a vulnerability in your API, we would detect that this person is not accessing your API in a pattern which is normal to this API. And we would detect that this is a broken object level authorization attack or broken object user authentication attack. And this is what we've implemented recently within API security. And then also integration is also one functionality that I'll talk about. So if you combine all of monetization is also one functionality that is something that is not available in all platforms.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, what makes us unique, we are a cloud native platform on Google Cloud. So any customer or any situation where there is workloads already in Google Cloud, or you need that integration to the wider Google Cloud ecosystem, for example, Cloud Armor for DDoS protection, the networking capabilities of Google Cloud, or for my part, cloud logging or anything else, that is all kind of connected quite well with Apigee. So talking about our pay-as-you-go product, that is only available in Google Cloud, and that's why Nabil was just explaining how it can be deployed on top of a GCP project. We do have other options that we call hybrid, where we can also run outside of Google Cloud for the runtime on other clouds or even on-premise.
So now let's see like how if you're using GCP already, you might be familiar with this organization of projects, organizations, folders. So on the top, you will have a GCP organization. So let's say you might have google.com, for example, as an org on the top level. And then you would have some folders within your org. So for example, you could have a folder based on your business units or based on your department. And then you can have subfolders underneath as well. Within those folders, you have the GCP projects. So you might have other projects as well. And here you would either create a project or enable Apigee in one of your existing projects. So that's, and this project will map to the Apigee organization that we talked about. And within these, within this Apigee project or multiple Apigee projects, in this case, you will have environments underneath. So the environments that we talked about would be linked to one single org in this case. So in this example, you see it's API management non-production project. And within this, we have created two environments in Apigee. One is dev and one is test. And then we have another project for production, and we have two environments. One is prod and one is sandbox. And repeating from my last slide, this architecture is recommended if you want a strict isolation between, let's say, the non-production or production environments. But as to start simply, if you don't have this requirement, you can also have all these four requirements under one GCP org or one GCP project as well. So how to provision your Apigee environment? Basically, there's these four steps over here. I'm showing you the user interface, but there are you can do that also through Terraform, and you can also do this through command line interface as well. The first step is when you will open apigee.com/provision, you will see that in which project you want to provision Apigee instance, Apigee organization, and then you will have these four steps. Step one would be enable all the APIs that are required in this provisioning process. So that's number one. Number two would be to set up networking. And we'll see that in the detailed steps in the next slides. But over here, you are doing that tiering step that you are choosing that this is my project that I want to peer this Apigee instance with. And then you choose the IP ranges as well in this step, right? The third step is that you choose where do you want to run your Apigee instance, both the runtime plane as well as analytics as well. So over here, as you can see, there are two regions that I've selected. And then the last step is that you configure the routing part, and you configure that do you want external people to access your APIs, or do you only want internal people to access your APIs? So that's what you will choose over here. And as a result, a load balancer would be created in the project where you're provisioning Apigee right now. And the load balancer would be an external layer 7 load balancer if you enable the internet access, or an internal load balancer based on if you configure that for internal only traffic. So after this fourth step, your environment would be ready, and you will see this screen. And this probably takes around 1 hour, and you have an option to deploy this API and then test out that your APIs, your Apigee instance is provisioned properly. So going into the details of this, these four steps, first, as I mentioned, you will go write Apigee in your GCP console, and you will come to this screen, and you will see set up Apigee button over here. Once you click on that, you will see three options. You will see that do you want to go with pay-as-you-go, do you want to choose subscription, or do you want to do a free trial? So if you choose pay-as-you-go option, you will come to this screen where you will enable your APIs as a first step. You need to have enough access rights to enable these APIs. So make sure when you're doing this step, you have the right access rights to enable these APIs in your project. If not, you would have to ask your GCP admin to give you access to enable these APIs in your own project. So once you do the first step, the second step is to set up networking. And in this case, if I click on edit over here, I will come to this screen where I can choose which network do I want to, or which virtual private cloud VPC I need to choose to peer this with the Google project that will be created in the provisioning process. So here I choose the network that I have created. If you're doing it here, I'm choosing the default. But in case if you have already created, let's say, a VPC in your organization, you would choose that over here in this step. So here you will have an option to either automatically allocate IP ranges or select the select custom ranges. In this case, I'm choosing automatic and also automatic for the runtime IP range. And once I do that, I go to the third step in which I'm configuring the choosing the runtime and analytics hosting regions over here. So I've been asked to choose which region do I want to have my analytics in, and these are the same analytics that Yariv also showed in the analytics part in his demo. And just repeating that analytics by default doesn't have any personal data or PII data. You can choose to log or save the runtime or payload, some of the payload data into and send it to analytics, but by default there's no PII data that is sent. So once I choose my region over here, I have an option to choose the runtime hosting region as well. Once I choose that, I can choose which encryption type. So you can either go with Google managed encryption key or customer managed encryption key. So this would be quick if you would choose Google managed encryption key. So once you do that, you will create an entry in KMS, and then all of your API configurations would be encrypted using this key that you are selecting over here. And once I'm done with the third step, the fourth step is to configure. And in this step, you will have this step would take a bit more time because after this step, you will the runtime instance would be provisioned. So under the hood, a GKE cluster is being created. So that might take some time over here. And the fourth step is you configure routing. So you choose over here if you want to choose that your API needs to be accessible on internet, you choose that option. And if you don't want, you can have no internet access. And in this case, an external load balancer would not be created. So you will also be able to choose a domain over here that you want to use to access your API in this case. And you can choose an automatically managed domain as well, which is a very easy and quick solution if you don't have your custom domain with you once you are provisioning the Apigee instance. So if you choose that, you will have a nip.io domain created for you that you can use right away to test out your APIs that you have just created. So once I do that, I will have this, you'll see that provisioning in progress and about 1 hour remaining. And this would create an instance, create an environment that you have created, create a load balancer, and then your environments would be provisioned in this case. Once this step is done, you would see this screen with a step to deploy API. Once I click on deploy API, you will see that a Hello World API will be deployed for you. and then you can go to find the URL of your Apigee environment group that has been created by going to admin and environment groups. Use that to call this API that we have just created, and then you would see a response for this Hello World API. And at this point, you would validate that you have created an Apigee instance, it's provisioned properly, and proxy has been deployed, and you're able to call this API proxy. So once this is done, you would be done with the whole complete setup. So the process that I've just explained, it's also you can also use the CLI to provision Apigee in this case, and also you can use Terraform modules to do the same. So, for example, a lot of our customers they use Terraform because if they plan to, let's say, destroy this instance, and maybe they want to spin up another same configuration in another region or for another org, they would simply reuse this Terraform configuration to do the same deployment again without having to go through these manual steps. So this ends this part where is for Apigee provisioning. So if I'm choosing this automatically managed domain, then it's you can either have a Google managed certificate as well, or if you choose a custom option, then you can upload your own certificates as well and have your own custom domain as well configured over here. And this is the setting that you're doing on the layer 7 load balancer on GCP in your project. So this is not specifically tied to Apigee. So if you go to Google Cloud Load Balancer Layer 7 configuration, you would see if it has all the functionality that you're looking for when it comes to certificate management. But it's SSL certificates that you would have, and also in what is coming up very soon, and I think it has been released as well, is also an ability to do the MTLS, so two-way TLS, not just one way, or the load balancer. So you can choose that option, and in that case, the load balancer would do the mutual TLS and terminate that, and then send that request back to Apigee after that.
Everything that is actually related to the networking layer is actually offloaded from Apigee to the networking GCP level, which means that, for example, if you want to bring your own IP address, everything you can do, but it's not really tied to the Apigee platform itself. It's the networking GCP layer. And I think you have a lot of flexibility to do some kind of this kind of things. Of course, we can check for your specific, let's say, question if for in the documentation to make sure that what you want to do exactly it is possible to do. But to give you that, the idea is really that to understand that everything that is related to the network layer is actually not coupled to Apigee. It's on the GCP networking layer, all the DDoS, load balancing, all these.
Perfect. So coming to the networking part within Apigee. So in Apigee, the API proxies that Yariv was creating in his demo, you can see two categories. One is how the API request enters into Apigee, and then other point is how the traffic is routed to the backend, right? So when you are configuring your API proxy, you will see that you have a proxy endpoint, and a proxy endpoint defines the HTTP endpoints on which it listens for the request. So for example, if I'm creating an API proxy, I would choose a path like /customers/info, right? So in this case, when an API request comes, it knows that this is an endpoint that I would want to run because this is the path that is matched for this. And then you can have like a separate logic if you want to have like a separate logic for that specific endpoint as well. So for example, giving an example from security perspective again, once there was a data breach in Instagram, and the reason was that they had security or rate limiting applied on the APIs, but they didn't have the rate limiting applied on the one-time code that is generated when you click on forget password. So someone was able to guess the codes by looping through and brute forcing the codes. But in this case, if you have multiple endpoints, you would have, let's say, rate limiting either applied on all of these endpoints, or could be that one single configuration that satisfies all of the endpoints that you will create over here. And then we have target endpoint, which defines the URLs of the backend services to which it connects to. So for example, if you have a backend in GCP, let's say if you have a cloud function or cloud run, you would give the target URL of that backend service over here, and then Apigee would connect to that service provided that it has access and the right access to access that service. So one other thing over here is, for example, if you have, let's say, Cloud Run backend in GCP, then while you are deploying this API proxy, you will get an option to use a service account that has invocation rights to that particular Cloud Run service. So once you provide that right service account, this API proxy that you have created would be able to call this backend Cloud Run because it has the right service account configured while we have deployed this API proxy. If you have any other backends, you would simply use the backend target for this backends over here. So connectivity from for the connectivity between clients and backend services, AppGX relies on the GCP VPC networking capabilities to basically connect the client applications to the runtime instance, and that we have already seen in the previous diagram through the load balancer, for example. And also it relies on GCP connectivity from your own project towards those backend instances. So let's assume that you have an on-premise backend service written in Java, right? So in that case, you would create a connectivity between your GCP project and your on-premise service, either through a VPN or through an interconnect, so that your project can get access to that backend service, and then Apigee would be able to reach that backend. So that configuration, again, is not done within Apigee itself, but that configuration of connectivity is done through GCP connectivity. So one of the benefits is also that when you use AppGX, you get all of these capabilities of Google Cloud as well. For example, if you are using any load balancers, it's not something that is built in within Apigee. You use the load balancing options from GCP, you choose it from there, and then that's how the traffic would enter. And similarly, you get access to all the other capabilities as well. So for example, DDoS protection and web application firewall, that is something that you would configure. Again, on the load balancer, you would configure Cloud Armor, which is a GCP service to do the DDoS protection and web application firewall, to do the WAF and DDoS capabilities for the APIs that you will configure on Apigee. And then you have all of these other networking capabilities like DNS resolution, static external IP addressing. All of these capabilities would be achieved by using GCP networking capabilities. And also, if you're logging, then you can use GCP logging and monitoring to basically log the data and then use a very detailed capabilities within GCP logging that, for example, if a certain logs will go to this, but the sensitive logs will go to this bucket. And if you have any, let's say, a spike in errors, then maybe you want to create a logging sync towards your any other provider that you might have, like Datadog or Splunk or any other. And these are the capabilities that you would achieve through logging and monitoring capability of GCP. Okay, perfect. So once we have now again this diagram shows what we have now actually provisioned after Apigee instance, and I'm just recapping the architecture over here. So we have a client. After we have provision, we have a load balancer because we chose external service or external exposure in this case. And then it's connecting to Apigee, and from Apigee, it's connecting to your backend services over internet, or also going back to your internal project that you have access to. So within this org, you have an instance and you have an environment running in that instance. And here you can have multiple environments and multiple instances as well that would be running in. And this is again the northbound, and this is the southbound, where you have connectivity to internal backends or connectivity to your private backend, like I explained, either through a cloud VPN or interconnect to have connectivity to your backends. If you have internal application, then you can have again a way for these apps to access your GCP network, and that is again outside Apigee. So you would either create a cloud VPN or an interconnect so that these private or internal applications can connect, and then you would create an internal load balancer so that these internal clients can access Apigee or those API proxies through an internal load balancer. And then, as I mentioned, you would have Cloud Armor over here as well as a best practice, which would prevent you from the application attacks like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and also it would protect you from any DDoS attacks that might happen. So the DDoS attacks are also you're protected from the DDoS attacks generally. If you're using an external load balancer, but if you go towards more layer 7 DDoS attacks, then you would need Cloud Armor to protect you from those DDoS attacks. So the architecture in this case, the recommended architecture, as explained, is to have a multi-layered security approach. So once you are provisioning Apigee over here, you might look into having Cloud Armor as well configured to protect you on the edge. So any traffic that is coming in, for example, if you have customers who you're a banking customer, you're a bank and your only customers are present in Europe, right? And you want to block access from, let's say, Africa because you don't have any business over there. So that's something that you can configure over here, that you only want to allow traffic from Europe and not from any other specific locations that you want to block. And then the DDoS protection, it would done using machine learning. So it will create a baseline of your traffic. So it would know that for you, for example, if you're a bank, it would know that at the end of the month, people are getting salaries. So maybe the rate of traffic goes up. So it would know that this is a normal pattern for your traffic. And as soon as it sees any abnormal pattern for your traffic, which could result which could be a DDoS attack, it would flag you at a very early stage that a DDoS attack is happening. And it will also generate a rule for you that this is an attack which is happening. It's coming from 6,000 IP addresses, 200 countries. These are the other elements or attributes of that attack. And this is the rule that you want to implement on Cloud Armor if you want to block this traffic. And this is a very tricky part, because once you know that you're having an attack, a very big part is to number one, detect it at a very early stage before the damage is done. And number two, isolating the attack from the normal traffic and then testing it out in the preview mode, and then implementing it after testing it out that it doesn't affect any other normal traffic. So one of the examples of Cloud Armor, how it protected one of our customers was, a couple of months ago, our customer got an attack with 46 million packets per second on HTTP. And for this customer, when the attack was in a very initial stage, I think it was around 5 or 10,000 requests per second. At that time, we flagged that this is an attack which is happening. And then we gave a rule to the customer, automatically created a rule. The customer got an alert. They saw the rule and they implemented the rule in the preview mode, tested it out, and then and when they implemented, the attack was still at around 10,000 per second. So once they implemented the rule in first 20 minutes of the attack got more bigger, and then the attack went up to 46 million packets per second. But at that time, the rules were already applied. Cloud Armor was already functioning to block that traffic. So when the attacker saw that this customer had already protection in place, they just rammed down the attack. And within 45 minutes, the attack was stopped from the attackers, and this customer was able to survive this DDoS attack. So if you use that, you would be protected since you would be exposing your APIs to public. So you might be under attack, and if you have a very if you are into a very sensitive market, then you would consider using Cloud Armor at the front. Any questions before I move to the shared VPC architecture on Cloud Armor? Now, if you have a lot of our customers have a shared VPC architecture. What shared VPC means is you have one host project with one VPC. And then you have multiple service projects that inherit this functionality of networking from the host VPC. And in Apigee, you can only peer with one project. So in some cases, you can use like a host project to peer your Apigee instance to, and then all the service projects in that case would be able to connect to Apigee, and because it would be using the same VPC in this case. So if you look at the shared VPC architecture, you can see that here now we have a host project, shared VPC host project, and then here we have a service project where we have all of our backend services. In this case, we have one project over here, and you can see that the peering with Apigee instance is done with the host project, and then shared VPC already is getting the networking is connected to the host project, so it inherits the functionality from here. So in this way, the host project would be able to get connected because it's using the shared VPC model. So now we have, let's say, now in this architecture, we have these services project, which is now trying to access the API. So now we are talking about any API consumers that are internal, but these consumers might be in a different GCP project. So in this case, these projects are again using the same shared VPC from the host project. And since they are have a shared VPC, they are able to access the Apigee instance in this model where they are acting in a service project. So in this case, let's say if you want to get send a API call which comes to Apigee, and then goes to a backend, which is in a different project, you would use shared VPC, and the call will go over here to Apigee and go back to this backend. In this case, there is also a new a service within GCP called Private Service Connect, which is in short a more easier way to connect these two projects. So rather than having VPC peering, you would create a private service connect between two projects, and then you would configure that I want to connect this project with this project over Private Service Connect. And you can use Private Service Connect instead of VPC peering to achieve this as well. How it would look like in architecture wise is, again, you have incoming client app sending the API traffic. You have a layer 7 load balancer, and then you have a private service connection PSC from this from your project towards Apigee instance. So once you will have Apigee instance, you will see that you have a possibility to connect your project to Apigee using the Private Service Connect as well, which is a more simpler and a more latest functionality that we've had. If we look at the internal applications who are connecting to Apigee, in this case, you would have again a cloud VPN with a layer 7 load balancer, in this case, internal load balancer, and again, a private service connection between this project and Apigee in this case. So you can see you have many to one connectivity in this case, and you can have multiple front ends as well in multiple different projects, and that would be connecting to Apigee in this case. So on the southbound side, it also works in the same way. You can connect to your backend projects using Private Service Connect. So in this case, I'm connecting to my backend Google Cloud project with the Private Service Connect. I have a load balancer, and load balancer might be balancing the request to multiple GKE endpoints on the backend, for example. So you can have again multiple backends, backend projects, and then Apigee on the southbound part would again use Private Service Connect to connect with these projects. So for example, in this case, there was no connectivity required. It was an internal service. But in this case, this project required connectivity with the private backend, maybe on in your on-premise. So in this case, the Private Service Connect connected to this third project. There was a layer 4 load balancer, a VPN to connect to your on-prem, and then sending the request to the backend services. And this is how you would configure it within Apigee. So once you go to Apigee, you will have, you will see the configuration option, both what I've shown on the previous slide over here in the northbound part and also in the southbound part as well. So if we look at this architecture end to end, we have seen that, and the difference over here is that I'm showing the front end architecture and the back end in one slide. And in this case, I have two instances configured over here as well. So the traffic in this case is coming to a layer 7 load balancer. And then there is a private service PSC from my project towards Apigee. And since PSC is a regional resource, that's why we need to have multiple resources if we have multiple instances in one org. So in this case, we had two instances, let's say one in Europe, one in US. So that's why we had created two private service connects over here. But you can see that environment, it's still one. So maybe it's a production, one environment, one org, two instances, and similar architecture for the backend as well. So I have a private service connect to the backend project over here and a private service connect to the backend project in another region as well. So here, the last point is very important, that even if I have two instances, Apigee will automatically replicate data for an environment across multiple instances. So let's say if my request goes to first instance and my next request goes to the second instance, it's not something that you have to do something. It's replicated automatically. So to a consumer, I wouldn't see any difference because my API call would return the same data normally as I would. So, so generally, now what we've seen is you've seen the demo, you've seen the deployment part, you've seen the networking part as well. Now, once you start with Apigee, you have seen the user proxy editor that Yariv has shown in the demo. So UI provides a very good drag and drop experience, but we see that a lot of customers, they don't use the UI, they use CI/CD to provision their APIs or publish their APIs. And that's the pattern that we've seen with 95% of the customers that at least I work with. So Apigee user interface is very good for learning purposes, testing purposes. But once you want to go into production, you must think about like a CI/CD approach. So in this section, I will talk about like how you can develop your CI/CD pipeline with Apigee and what tools can you utilize to integrate with your current CI/CD infrastructure that you already have. So this is a normal life cycle of a CI/CD, and like generally a developer would create a backend API and then they would create an API proxy, but they would have or would like to have that code in a source control management system for, let's say, GitHub. Once they do that and they create this API proxy, put it into GitHub, the next step is you would have a pipeline that runs a series of tasks, right? And this is even outside Apigee. If you're using any other API management platform, generally this is the pipeline that you would see, that you would run some code and analysis. So you would do, let's say, linting to detect if someone has written the proxy in the best practice way, or if someone has maybe configured JavaScript and they have not configured it in a secure way. So this part would do the linting and see all of that and give you any errors or warnings if you have any. Then a developer would run some unit tests for their API that they have created. Once it is done, they will use some tools by Apigee to actually build that API proxy that Yariv showed in the demo using drag and drop. But here you would have some tools provided by Apigee to do that in your CI/CD pipeline without coming to this user interface. And we have a couple of tools, for example, Apigee CLI, SACMesser, a Maven plugin, all of these different tools that you would find on our Apigee DevRel, a GitHub repository, where you can go and use these tools to use that in your CI/CD pipeline. Then you would run the integration test, get the reports. If the reports are fine, you would publish that API to the sandbox environment. And within that sandbox environment, then you would run some more tests if the developer wants to promote that to the production environment. So if you map it to the some of the tools that we provide, the same life cycle, then Apigee provides you with some of the tools. For example, Apigee Lint that you see over here is an open source linting tool that we have created to do the linting and tell you that if someone has created an API in using the best practices, then you would run some unit tests using these tools. Build and deploy, I talked about the plugins that we have, SACMesser, Maven, Apigee CLI, to build, deploy, configure the API bundle and publish that into the environment using the management APIs of Apigee. Run the integration test over here, publish the reports, and update the API and also the developer portal as well. Once you create an API proxy, you are able to download that as form of a bundle. So the proxy that Yariv created, if you download that, you will get a bundle with these things. For example, API proxy / targets, and it will have the target endpoints. The policies like API key or quota policy are also added into this. So these are all XML files that are added or in a directory structure. And generally you would have this structure and you would put it into your source control management system. And to everything that you see on the Apigee user interface is more or less available as a management API as well. So if you create a proxy, if you create an API product, if you create an API key developer, publish that API proxy, all of that is available as a management API. So when we also in our developer portal have to get access to, let's say, all the API products that you have created, we also use the same management APIs internally to get this data, right? Same goes for analytics as well. So you would also use the same management APIs over here to get access to this and probably use it in your CI/CD pipeline to call these management APIs and then implement this logic and integrate into your CI/CD pipeline. The tools that I talked about before is also a very good way to save some time, because those are the wrappers written on top of the management APIs. So one of my personal favorite ones is Apigee CLI, which you can use to, let's say, create an API proxy, which under the hood uses some management APIs, but to you it gives some abstraction layer, so you would get a lot of different options to choose from, like how do you want to deploy your API proxy. So there's no single setup that works for everyone. You already might have your CI/CD pipelines. So what we do is we provide you these tools that would integrate with your CI/CD pipeline. So if you're using GitHub Actions, or if you're using maybe something on Azure DevOps, or if you're using GCP, still these tools that I will show in the slides would integrate with your CI/CD pipeline that you already have. So I talked about Maven plugin over here. They could be used to configure these APIs or deploy these APIs into Apigee environment. And if you would open one of this, let's say these plugins, you would see that these plugins are actively managed by us, and there are different releases with different features that we do. And it's very actively managed with updated features as well. So you could choose either Maven plugin or Apigee CLI or SAC method to configure the APIs and then deploy different parts of this API proxy into your Apigee environment. One way to configure is also through your, let's say if I'm a developer, but I don't want to do all of this. I want to create an API proxy using my using an ID that I'm using. So for example, if I'm using Visual Studio Code, I would have that Apigee plugin over here as well. So using this, I would be able to create the API proxy in Visual Studio Code, and it would do all the auto completion for me. For example, if I'm creating an API proxy, adding an API key on top of it, quota policy, it would do all the auto completion for me. And then I would be able to run unit test on my own laptop by configuring the Apigee runtime in a Docker container within this Visual Studio Code. And once I've created this proxy, I would run the unit test. If the test passed, I would publish this API that I have created, API proxy that I've created into the environment that you have. So linting, I talked about. This is the link for that. If you see this and if you want to utilize this, this would run into your pipeline, and then you would get some warnings if there are some tests which have failed, and then you get some ready-made rules for linting, but you can also add your own custom rules as well into the linting as well. So and then you can use your own tool. For example, ESLint is an open source tool that checks that if JavaScript has been configured properly. You can do that. Here are some other tools that you want to do, maybe to do some testing, or you can have your own tools as well that come in and you can integrate at different parts in your CI/CD cycle. Apigee is one tool that is created by one of our colleagues, and you can basically write the test cases for the API in natural language. So if I've created this airports API, I can just talk to it in a natural language, and then it would generate or test the APIs and give me a result like this. And let's say in your CI/CD pipeline, you can configure that if all of these pass, then I would be able to publish this into, then the next step will be triggered, which might be that a Maven plugin is used to publish this into a dev environment. If you have any cases in which you want to connect two applications separately, you can use application integration as well, which is also another product that we have created within Apigee. So if you have two applications, let's say if I join as a new employee, some process should be triggered and something I should connect to a workday application, get my data and maybe put it into a salary system. So in this way, application integration could be used instead of Apigee because it's a business process orchestration, and that's what you would use application integration for. And the integration could be triggered using an API, a message triggered onto a Kafka topic or a pub sub, or manually scheduling this. You would use some different tasks within Apigee, within application integration, like data mapping, filtering the message, merging, connecting to an external system, enriching the data, for looping. Maybe you want someone to have a look at that data at a certain step, so someone has to approve it, and before the person approves, the integration will be in a pending approval mode. So all of these tasks could be done over here, and I have mentioned a few of them, but we have a very big list of tasks. And then you might want to use the connectors. So we have 50 plus connectors. So maybe you want to connect to BigQuery or Salesforce or Workday, Kafka, MongoDB, GCP or non-GCP applications. You would use a connector to connect to these applications and basically send this data to the application that you are connecting to using these connectors. But you can also use it in PAYG. So just like application integration in your GCP console, and you would see this product.
So thank you all, and see you in the upcoming session.
Thank you so much for attending. Have a nice day.